my boss found out I was interviewing elsewhere. Ooh, I've been in this situation. When asked about it, I was honest. I feel good about being honest, but do you have any other advice on this topic? I do ultimately want to leave, but feel very awkward in the meantime. This is a good question, I think. This happened to me here, where I found out that someone was interviewing, and then you're like, shit, what do I do with it as the manager? But also you have to respect like what the ultimate signal is, which is, hey, that person's not happy and they don't want to work for you. This is always just such an awkward thing because you don't necessarily want to out yourself that you're interviewing because you don't know if you're going to get a job, and you don't even know if you get a job offer, if you want to take that job. It's also upsetting to your boss, as you can imagine, who's like, holy shit, this person's like doing something behind my back. So it's super natural for people to go look for a job. It's super natural, and it's a good thing that people want to grow their careers, make a life change, experience something new, or they've outgrown or tired of, or they don't like the company anymore. Like that shit is all super natural and good. I think in this case, you did exactly the right thing, which is to be honest. You know, sometimes people often say like, hey, I was approached, I didn't reach out for the job. I have to be honest, like that whole line of talking doesn't really matter, because the net is, if you love this job so much, you wouldn't take the other call. And there's nothing wrong with wanting to take the other call. You should just be straight on like, hey, you know, this company reached out to me. I thought it was super interesting. And I had a conversation. And then I think your boss is probably going to be like, well, like what's going to come of it? And that leads you almost to the more awkward spot of now what? And I think the best thing to do is to just be super honest and as transparent as you can be in the process. If you are going through this, and if you're in a position where your boss knows you're interviewing, or you think your boss might know, you got to make sure your work product and your commitment is excellent. So you're still delivering things on time. You're not slipping. You're not like sloughing stuff off. You're not like delegating it. You're doing your job great. Everyone knows you're considering a change. And then I think at some point, and probably very soon, it's worthwhile to have a conversation with your manager to say, hey, here's what I'm learning. I love it here. I realize after talking to all these companies or this one company that there are so many great things about this place, and here's what they are. What I also realized is I'm looking for something different than my current role. That could be this is one possible scenario. There could be all sorts of scenarios for this conversation. What I've realized is this isn't the place for me. If you say that, then you have to leave. What I've realized is I'm in the right company in the wrong role. Long story short, you've got to figure out like the Rubik's Cube of you, your job, your company, your manager, and then have a really proactive, honest, forthright conversation on, hey, I've learned a lot in this process. I'm going to be moving on. I want to do that amicably. Or you might say, hey, I've learned a lot. I've realized I love this here. I realize I want to do more. But you need to know that the same position at another company is paying, a third again as much, or they're paying me 10% more, or their compensation looks this way. And then I think it's fair to say, I'm really committed to staying, and I would love to have a conversation in the future about what my compensation looks like or what my responsibility looks like, all of that. So that's a very long-winded answer. I guess what I would say overall is it's going to be awkward. So like buckle up for some awkwardness. I think the more forthright you can be in this process from here on out, the better off you're going to be, the better off your manager will take it. And then ultimately, you're hopefully going to be in a position where you have a decision on, do you want to stay and double down, or do you want to go and leave this behind you? And both of those options are great ones. Okay, second question. Hi, Token Team. If a job posting comes up for something that would be interesting to you at a company you would want to work at, and it fits your skills, but is a lower position level-wise, for example, an analyst position when you are a manager, what would your advice be in terms of making that move? Ooh, this is a great question. I'm leaning toward it being worth it if I know there's room for growth, but I was curious about your overall thoughts. Thanks. And this person loves podcasts. That's always a benefit. Okay, what I would say on this one is I think most titles are bullshit and they're just like a bunch of marketing words jumbled together, which if you really deconstruct them, you don't know what they mean in the first place. So the difference in this case between an analyst and a manager, who really knows? And also who really cares? I think what you want to find out is what are the responsibilities of this role versus the responsibilities that you have now. If the role is big enough and you have enough to chew on, I'm a big proponent of taking jobs that scare you. So if it gives you something to bite into that you think is incredible, then who cares what the title is? If you're taking a step back though, and you're going to, you're managing people, you're doing all these things, and then you're taking a step back to, let's say, working in a job that in your company would work for you, then I think you have to be really, really clear about the growth path, because ultimately that's going to be frustrating to you. You're going to have this like incredible 6 months in your new gig where you're like, I'm the best at everything. I've done this before. I'm so good. But then you're going to be frustrated because you're better than your peers or your manager, and your comp isn't going to necessarily reflect it, and your title isn't going to necessarily reflect it, and your position isn't going to reflect it. So I think the biggest thing is put aside the title, focus on the responsibility, make sure there's growth, whether it's a step back or a step forward. I'm a big believer in that every job should scare you. I also really think when you're early mid in your career, sometimes shifting down in the car and making a pivot to a better company, a better industry, a better sector, a better department, that can be a really, really good move and open up a lot more opportunities for you. So I think you're on the right path, and so long as this opportunity does that for you, then go for it. Last question. Can we talk about how long the application and interview process should be? Ooh, this is a tough one. I was just rejected by a company after 5 rounds of interviews and 1 test that I passed. The whole process took almost 2 months. I understand this process for certain jobs, but this was a small corporation. Annoyed and confused after taking so much time off my current job to interview. How do I avoid this in the future? This is an awesome question. I think everyone has been through this type of situation, or maybe is in this type of situation. We're kind of in this situation on a whole bunch of jobs that we have here now. And so what I would say is this is just one of the annoying processes of looking for a job or hiring someone for a job. There's a lot of different stakeholders. There's a lot of macro factors. Does your company have the budget that it thought it had? Is the role approved? Sometimes companies take a couple people to approve a job and one person is holding out. There's a whole bunch of shit that goes into finding a great candidate, hiring a great candidate, and getting that great candidate to start. So I think all of that said, this seems like a pretty lousy process. 2 months, 5 interviews, not a whole lot of response. That's tough. I think the signal for you should be, hey, maybe this company isn't totally sold on this role to begin with. And also, they weren't totally sold on you. And that doesn't mean that you're bad or you're not great or you aren't brilliant. It's like there was something off in this interview process. I think you're super right to be frustrated about how much time you took, but it's also kind of the name of the game. Every job you interview for, you're not guaranteed to get. Ideally, every interview process should be clean, it should be organized, it should be quick, it should be well managed, it should be highly communicative. That rarely happens because you're basically dealing with people who have other full-time jobs. You're trying to coordinate around some type of matrixed organization. Even if the company is small, they're still matrices. So I don't know that you can ever avoid it in the future. I think it is totally right that leaves a little bit of a bad taste in your mouth from this company. But I think the best thing you can do is learn from this process. What did you like about this company? What did you like about that job? What did you learn along the way? And what is it that you think made you not make the final cut for the candidate? And if you have a good sense of that, you can decide, do you care or do you not care? Maybe you care, maybe you don't care. And then I think that last thing is when you go into an interview process, I always think it's a fair question to be like, what's your expectation for this process? How long do you think this is going to take? How many stakeholders are there in this role? Is this job approved and funded? Those are very reasonable questions to ask. And if you get good answers to those things, my sense is that you'll probably have a faster, more streamlined process going forward.